come on. You've seen some of our videos. They're original, good quality, interesting, different. There are even a few squareheads who think our videos are scary. Seriously, man, what more do you need to subscribe?
You know, sometimes I take a look at some of Carlsen's victories, where he simply plays on and on in completely drawn positions until his better physical form gets the best of some of his opponents. And I can't help comparing the talent shown in those games by Magnus and the one shown by Fischer in many of his games. Let me tell you, the current world champion doesn't come out too well. Regardless of what you think about Fischer's actions later in life, and yes, I'm thinking about things like those infamous interviews that he gave in the Philippines, bear in mind that he was a different person then, and although I cannot defend, in the very least, some of the things that Fischer said in those days, I also believe that Fischer was never treated like a true national hero when he won the World Championship against the Russians, and how much it really meant then. America forgot very quickly what he had achieved. In this video, we'll be taking a look at a game played between international master Anthony Sadie and Bobby Fischer. Bobby was 26 at the time, Anthony was 32. By the way, Sadie was a famous doctor who even had time to write books like The Battle of Chess Ideas. He was also a great fan of Fischer. When Fischer first refused to play in the World Championship in Iceland, he secluded himself at Sadie's family home in Long Island, and apparently it was Sadie himself who, using his better judgment, no doubt, encouraged Fischer to take part in the match that made him world champion. Alright, let's get on with this interesting game. Fischer is playing black against Anthony Sadie, who's playing white. English opening. And here Fischer chooses this move, which resembles the Grand Prix attack against the Sicilian defense. That's what the Grand Prix attack looks like, with reverse colors, obviously. So it's pretty much the same position, but with reverse colors. And bishop to b4 looks like the most natural move here. And after e3, intending knight ge2, and then a3, maybe black can take. And then castle. I don't think d5 is such a great move in this position because it's going to open up the position, and then white's two bishops are going to be very powerful. So possibly d6. And then queen e8, intending queen h5 and then f4. The problem is your opponent is going to anticipate your plan and strike you with f4. And I think this position is probably slightly better for white. Not all that much, but I think, you know, at the end of the day, the two bishops and black having been deprived with the possibility of playing f4, surely this position must favor white. So back to the game, Fischer played bishop to c5, which is an interesting move, and now he tried f4, and this was a completely new idea at the time. It's funny because the game was played in 1969, and right now the f5 variation in the Grand Prix attack is one of the most popular, and apparently Fischer was the first one to invent this idea, to come up with this interesting idea, which goes to show you that perhaps opening theory has not evolved as much as we pretend. Anyway, back to the game. In the game, white played e takes f, and it's surprising because white normally chooses this move when confronted with f4, but I don't think this is the correct move. Even Karpov has played it, e takes f. I'll get back to that game that Karpov played later, but to me it makes far more sense to take with the g-pawn, and then after e takes f, strike in the center with d4, and when the bishop retreats to, or goes to b4, then e4. The pawn on f4 is hanging. I've analyzed this position, and really this position is just so good for white because he's got a huge center, but not only that, his pieces are coming out to the right squares without any problems. You know, you don't normally get positions like this nowadays in your games. There's always one problem on another, and here white's got everything. Anyway, back to the game. In the game, white chose e takes f, and now this bishop becomes stronger, and black also gains more control over the d4 square. So You know, I think black has better prospects than if white did take with the g-pawn. So we castle here. Queen e8 is a normal move in these positions. We play along the e file, and the queen wants to come to either g6 or h5, and then d6. And the very logical move for white now is to try and get rid of black's annoying dark squared bishop with knight a4. There are other moves here, like bishop e3 has been tried also, and knight to e4. I think possibly bishop e3 is probably the strongest. Not really sure. Knight there, bishop to d4, very good move. And the point is that now when white takes on d4, we do not take back with the knight, which is the move that you'd expect here. Because if you do take with the knight, then white's got an easy game. You know, it's going to go something like this, and then rook e1, and he's got a fine game. But we take with the e-pawn. And there's a problem for black now, because look at that knight on a4. It's not doing very much. And black's queen is coming to g6, then possibly bishop f5, pointing at d3. I really think white should think twice about repeating this variation, because that knight on a4 is really not a very good piece. So h3, which kind of controls the g4 square, prepares g4 himself. So h5 is a logical move now. b4 is a threat after a3, so we need to play a5, and then queen g6. Knight b2, the knight tries to get back into play, but even from b2, it doesn't really have very good prospects. So bishop f5, and now look at that knight on f6. It looks alright, but it's not really doing very much. So Fischer tries to get back into play with knight d7 and then knight c5. Really good idea. I really like that knight d7 move, and I also like Fischer's next move, rook to a6, intending rook to b6. What a simple and strong idea. Simple rook lift, attacking b3. So bishop d2 now, rook b6, and here white's got this tactical shot. The idea is that if knight takes, then b4, forking two pieces. So rook takes b3. Taking on c7 looks extremely dangerous because of rook c8. So bishop d2 here, and now we we attack the pawn on a3, and also we're going to do exactly the same thing with the other rook. It's going to come to a6 and then to b6. Rook a6, really good move. a5 to prevent that. But now, yeah, it's funny because Karpov himself played this exact position as white against Grandmaster Bellon. The game was eventually drawn, but I think Karpov was a little bit lucky to survive that game because he was worst. In that game, Grandmaster Bellon tried knight b4, which, to be honest, it looks like the most logical move to me. In this game, Fischer actually played king to h7 instead. And now, after rook e d1, adding protection to d3, black simply played b6. So if pawn takes pawn, we take with this rook, and we've got the two nice rooks piled up on the b file. So white preferred to play these. But if you look at this position now, after pawn takes pawn... Whoops, phone call. I'm going to stop that and get it later. Now, after knight a4, the problem for white in this position is that his pieces are so passive, and black's got an extra pawn on the a file, so this position is really very difficult for white. So now knight a4, rook takes d3, beautiful move by Fischer. Bishop takes. Black's got excellent compensation for the exchange. The pawn on c4 is hanging. Really nice sacrifice by Fischer. And now knight b4. If bishop takes, pawn takes, the a file is open, and then the knight on a4 would be pinned. So queen to a3, knight c2, takes, and knight takes a4. The position has been simplified, and now black simply threatens a move like queen to f3 and then bishop e4 with a checkmating attack. Possibly queen c1 is best now, but then queen f3, intending bishop e4, rook a3, queen e2, threatening queen f1, and if bishop takes, simply c5, threatening bishop takes c4, then the bishop comes to d5. The position is really quite hopeless for white. In the game, white played, instead of that, white took on a5, which is a blunder, and now black simply took on a5, and then black was a piece up. What a fabulous game. What a daring game by Fischer, sacrificing a pawn early in the opening when no one had done it before. Do I think Fischer is the greatest chess player who has ever lived? I definitely do. Because he achieved just about everything on his own. I mean, at the World Championship and maybe before that, he did have some support from Grandmaster Larry Evans and so on, but still, Fischer did and learned everything on his own compared to other modern grandmasters who've got heaps of people supporting them. Fischer achieved absolutely everything on his own. If you just think about the World Championship match against Spassky, the Russian team, how many people were there in the Russian team? And Fischer beat just about all of them on his own. Think about that.